In this segment, we're going to take a look at the impact of the Cold War right here at home. The fear of communism and the threat of nuclear war affected American life throughout the Cold War at many different levels. During the 1950s and 60s, American schools regularly held drills to train children what to do in case of a nuclear attack. They were to duck and cover. These notions seem a little bit, well, idiotic today. As we know, if a nuclear bomb went off, we would all be incinerated. And if we weren't incinerated, we would quickly die from the radiation. But at the time, it gave Americans the feeling of some empowerment, where they felt like they had some control over the situation. That even if an atomic bomb exploded, they could duck and cover and still be safe. American citizens were urged by the government to build bomb shelters in their own basements and in their backyards. This was going to be their safe place to go in case of a nuclear attack. They could have some luxuries. They could have food and water and radios and perhaps outlast a nuclear attack. There was also increasing fears of communism and communists right here at home. The conviction of Alger Hiss of being a spy for the evil Soviet Union, and the convictions of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, convicted of spying and selling atomic secrets to the evil Soviet Union, raised America's fears. After all, these were people who perhaps lived next door. They could be your neighbor, your friends, your cousins, your aunts and uncles. They could be anybody. So who are the communists anyway? Americans begin to wonder. And once our curiosity was piqued, it wasn't long before the politicians are going to get into the act. There's going to be another witch hunt, not for real witches like the people in Salem thought, but a hunt for communists. It was going to be led by this guy holding the piece of paper. That's Senator Joseph McCarthy. His name becomes essentially the word McCarthyism. And McCarthyism refers to the idea of making false accusations that are based on rumor or guilt by association to accuse somebody of being a communist without anything to back them up. As you can see, all it's going to take is a shadow of doubt that the idea that somebody is accused of being a communist when suddenly they need to prove that there aren't. Even though in the United States we feel that we are innocent until proven guilty, not to Joseph McCarthy. And McCarthyism said, why don't you prove that you're not a communist instead? He was known for having this phrase. He would stand up in front of Congress and say, I have a list of known communists. I have a list of names of known communists, of people who have been associated with the Communist Party. By the way, we never actually saw his list of communists, but it was certainly enough to raise public awareness and to make neighbor turn against neighbor out of pure and total paranoia. Eventually, though, we did have enough of Joseph McCarthy. He became very popular. And after all, he was a tough man to criticize. After all, if you criticize Joseph McCarthy, then perhaps you were a communist. Eventually, America tuned in a little too carefully for McCarthy, and we found as his accusations were being televised, as his hearings were being televised on live TV, Americans tuned in and saw his bully tactics, saw him labeling people as communist, and he seemed to almost self-destruct on television, where most Americans opposed communists and were strongly in favor of the United States in the Cold War. We just didn't like the way he was going after it. He eventually lost his election and left office in relative obscurity. But McCarthyism shows us the idea of a witch hunt. The Cold War is going to make foreign policy a major issue in every presidential election during this period. From Truman to Bush, every person who wants to be president had to have a strong foreign policy in which to fight the Cold War. It was the dominant feature, both in foreign policy as well as domestic policy, that every president needed to address. Even in Virginia, we were affected by the Cold War. The heavy military expenditures throughout the Cold War is going to benefit Virginia's economy proportionately more than most other states. So the Cold War was economically good for Virginia. Its impact was especially dramatic in the Hampton Roads area, which is home to several large air and naval bases. And then in Northern Virginia, the home of the Pentagon, has numerous private companies that contract with the military, also impacted significantly. We have paranoia, we have bomb shelters, but we also have money flowing in to Virginia's economy.